Hello all and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to allow a minute or two here for everybody to join. As you're joining the webinar here, you probably have noticed, some of you certainly already have seen it, on the right side of the page there is a section for chat, and I see that our speaker here is already engaging. We've got some participants engaging. Go ahead and drop in the chat there where in the world you're calling in from here today, and I'll go ahead and drop where I am. Quite a few from Ireland, welcome. Sweden, welcome. Brazil, Boston, Barcelona, wonderful. Well, we will give it about another 30 seconds to a minute here for all those to go ahead and drop where it is you're calling from, and then we'll start the presentation here.
Great. Hello, everyone. Hello,
We'll
Chris.
go ahead and get started. Hello, Dr. Vasiliadis. Welcome. Well, let's go ahead and jump in here. I appreciate everybody dropping in the chat where it is you're calling in from. Dr. Vasiliadis is calling from Saudi Arabia today, so welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar. The topic today is PMCF as part of lifecycle management, insights from working with notified bodies. My name's Chris Rush. I'm a solutions engineer here at Greenlight Guru, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Today's session will run for about 60 minutes in total, including roughly 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. Dr. Stathios Vasiliadis will take us through today's topic with insight.
Did we lose Chris, or did we not? Chris, I think we lost you for a little bit. Meg is coming back.
Am I back here?
You're back. Hello.
Okay, sorry about that. That's the... Okay, hopefully my internet connection continues to stabilize. I'm just going to be doing the intro here, so we'll hopefully get through this, pass it to our speaker here. Don't know what is going on with my internet, but I apologize for that. I'll take a step back here. Today's session is going to be about an hour. We're going to go through a number of topics that Dr. Vasiliadis will present: new approach to PMCF, PMCF and risk management continuum, driving innovation with PMCF data, as well as turning compliance into a competitive advantage. I'm going to turn my camera off in case that helps here. For those who are new to our webinars, let me quickly walk you through the interface here. On the right side of your screen, you have probably already seen a few tabs. Firstly, there's the chat tab. You'll want to use this for engaging with other attendees as well as posting general comments. There's a separate Q&A tab just to the right of the chat tab, and this is where you should submit any questions you'd like Dr. Stathis to address during the Q&A portion at the end. Please make sure to use that Q&A tab only for questions, if you would, as we won't be monitoring the general chat for questions specifically, although I do try and catch them and put them over on the Q&A side. But please do put questions in the Q&A portion of the chat there. After the webinar, we'll send a follow-up email to all registrants with the full recording and slides, so you can revisit today's discussion at your convenience. I'd like to share a few words about Greenlight Guru and why we put on these free sessions. So let me get to the right tab there. So improving the quality of life for our customers and their patients is our mission here at Greenlight Guru, likely a similar mission to many of you joining us here today. At Greenlight Guru, our focus is on moving medtech forward, and that means helping you get your life-changing medical devices to market and keeping them there over time. We know the challenges that medical device companies face in this heavily regulated industry, and our solutions are designed to help streamline your processes so you can navigate the regulatory hurdles and succeed in the market. Here at Greenlight, we provide medical device companies with industry-leading quality management system and electronic data capture software solutions to scale faster, become more efficient, and ultimately reduce risk throughout the product lifecycle. Let's see if I can reshare my video here. I'm feeling stable. So today's webinar will focus on giving you expert insights on how PMCF can be leveraged, not only to maintain compliance, but also to drive continuous improvement, innovation, and competitive differentiation. By integrating PMCF into lifecycle management processes, medical device companies can stay ahead in an increasingly complex regulatory environment. Specifically designed for medtech operations and all PMCF data activities, Greenlight Guru Clinical is a single compliant platform for collection and management of all clinical evidence and performance and safety data. If you are interested in learning more about this system and how it can help you streamline your clinical data for clinical investigations or PMCF, you can schedule a demo with us by simply writing demo in the chat, and we will follow up with you. So go ahead and drop the word demo in the chat if you would like to receive a demo. Now let's turn our attention to today's special guest, Dr. Estafios Vassiliadis. Dr. Vassiliadis is the founder and CEO of Evnia, a Danish regulatory clinical affairs and real-world evidence expert firm. Evnia is working with over 190 manufacturers globally, ensuring their devices are in the market, in compliance, and with adequate clinical data. Dr. Vassiliadis has 2 decades of successful experience in the international biotechnology field, bringing successful innovation and startups in the market and attracting international investors towards releasing and maintaining products in the market internationally. We are thrilled to have Dr. Vassiliadis with us here today. His insider perspective is invaluable, and we know you'll gain a lot from the insights that he will share today. So let's go ahead and dive in and get started with the presentation. Dr. Vassiliadis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chris, and a warm welcome to everyone all over the world that you are joining us today. Thank you for also investing some of your time, and I hope it's going to be a useful communication for all of you. Nowadays, as you know, it's sometimes challenging to find information that someone cannot Google. So the aim of my talk today is to communicate and share some knowledge, accumulative knowledge, actually from implementing MDR and PMCF that someone cannot Google, essentially. So it's our own experience. A big part of this motivation, of course, is because even though it has been now several years that MDR has been drafted, utilized, we're still learning quite a lot of things about the way that notifying bodies are interpreting those regulations. And I'm fairly certain that we have quite a few people joining us today. When we actually all sit down and discuss our challenges and solutions, we find out that with the same regulations, there's so many interpretations depending on which one is a notifying body. So I guess there's 2 things that I would like to share with you as messages. First of all, is that to, of course, communicate our own experience with notifying bodies. We have actually been to so many meaningful interactions with notifying bodies. That's number 1. But also to actually going a bit further, to actually see how can we actually use this regulation and some of the PMCF activities in order to gain a competitive advantage for our devices. And I know that this sounds on the first glance maybe a bit a paradox, because there is still a lot of resistance to implementing real-world evidence activities. But I think that what I'm going to share with you today constitutes quite a convincing story about how can this be used in a meaningful way. A few things about Evnia. I think that Chris have already reached, you covered everything that there is there. Obviously, we want to actually support manufacturers throughout the device lifecycle management. And actually, it's a big part of this mentality shift that I would like to share this with you today, because I'm guessing that the majority of the participants may be from either a regulatory or clinical background. But I think sometimes that we're actually losing a bit of, we're missing our audience within the organizations we're working with, because we're actually trying to communicate regulatory demands to different stakeholders, and it's not always easy to engage with them. Now, as Chris said, that's the topic we're going to share today for PMCF as part of the lifecycle management, and some of the insight with working with notifying bodies. As a first step, in order to also for me to understand, your own experiences, we have actually prepared some polls for you to actually respond to, so we can actually make it, even though it's a bit it's virtual, we can still have some meaningful interaction in our in this presentation. So, Chris, can we actually just start with this with the polls? Wonderful. As I expected, obviously the vast majority of everyone who is interested in or using PMCFs have a scientific background, and I think this is actually really important for us to communicate as well, and remind to ourselves that for anyone who has a scientific background, essentially the PMCF work is nothing else than implementing the scientific method, but just having a focus on performance and safety. There's nothing more to that. There's nothing new to anyone who has a scientific background to PMCF activities. And the reason I want to actually to discuss that is, as I said earlier, the combination of having a scientific background plus a regulatory knowledge is, of course, a big plus. However, I think that often we're losing a lot of our audience in the organizations we're working with because we're actually, because of the way that we communicate. How do we want to structure the PMCF activities that we're, and what is the value of those? And then we have actually one more poll that we have started people to ask. And this is, what stopped you from running PMCF activities in the past? And I think that maybe we can actually just share maybe half a minute for you to answer that. I think it's going to be a meaningful exercise. So we only have a very few votes yet, but I think because great. So we see so far, thank God we don't have anyone who says I don't believe in data and I go with faith. It's an obvious outlier. But I think there is a great. Great. So
and if anyone's looking for the poll tab, it's sandwiched between the chat and the Q&A. If you're looking for it, I think most everyone's found it, but the poll tab is the separate one right there in the middle.
Yeah. The reason I thought it's actually interesting to actually look at this as part of this presentation today is because obviously we're dealing with so many manufacturers. We have actually discussed with manufacturers about PMCF programs. We have implemented, we got data. There's a lot of meaningful interaction. So obviously we wanted to actually see from your end, what is your main obstacles for obtaining approval to get the PMCF activity? And we go back to, let's say, the first one, almost, let's say, 1/3 of the participants, they had they understand, you understand your what needs to be done in terms of PMCF. You have a plan and you want to implement it, but the management says, no, thank you very much. Obviously, that can be because of funding. That's a really valid reason to say no. But through our discussions, we have found out that a big part of this, let's say, resistance for PMCFs is because the management cannot understand what is it that they're gaining out of that. They just see it as a cost, not as an opportunity. And I think that we have a very good opportunity here for us to change the way we communicate our PMCF activities, and not just see it as a regulatory necessity, but see how can we actually connect it with a device life cycle. Because, and I will go through that with my presentation. Funding, of course, is a very valid reason. However, here again we have one more opportunity, because PMCFs can come with different ways and forms, and not everything needs to be expensive. It just needs to be implemented as part of the device lifecycle, and not just as a one-off activity that is, somehow implemented once and then it's forgotten. Lack of processes. if and again, I guess it's more or less what we were expecting here. The divided within 30, let's say 25, 30%, 30%, and lack of processes. Most of organizations that went through the MDD to MDR, they had lack of processes. Therefore, we say we cannot do it, so we have to outsource this work to a CRO or organization like us in EMEA to do it. And again, what I'm saying here, that this lack of processes can increase the cost sometimes. However, a well-structured CRO should actually have those processes embedded, so it can actually be a turn-on solution, not an additional burden. The company culture, I guess, 15% of everything we have here is company culture, and I guess one can actually say that the company culture comes from management. And goes back to the point I want to make is that, if we as regulatory and the clinical experts or professionals, we're good in outlining what is the benefits other than the regulatory ones, then we can actually change a lot of the management decisions, and through that, the company culture as well. So let's go back to the presentation, because I would like to wrap this up together in terms of what is the the meaning of how can we connect this.
Let me know if this is the wrong slide. I'll let you kind of navigate from
here.
No,
it's spot on. It's spot on. So, excuse me. So we all went through that grief cycle of denial, anger, bargaining, and depression, and mostly for a lot of organizations, and as we can see also from the poll, maybe 1/3 of them went from depression back to denial, and because of management, 1/3 went from to bargaining because of costs, and then some other ones went to just only as far as anger because of company culture. So I think that everyone can actually relate to this grief cycle. But what we want to actually focus today is how can we actually change this grief cycle into a success cycle. Essentially, how can we implement the necessity of PMCFs through acceptance, planning, collect, analyze, and repeat the data. And one way that we can actually do that, and obviously we have seen that, is sharing our experience from doing that. So what I'm going to present here today is obviously comes from, I chose like 24 case studies that we had in the last couple of years out of God knows how many. And this actually concerns 24 different case studies and 7 different notifying bodies. All of those had 24 organizations that had major findings because of the lack of PMCF activities. And all of those have tried to attempt to bypass the PMCF responsibility by leaning to reactive data. Some of them also have tried to say, oh, we're going to do some literature searches, and we're going to baptize it as proactive. Obviously, anyone who can maintain a body temperature of 37 degrees can understand that literature search is not a proactive activity. It's not organized by the manufacturer. It basically means nothing. It's a reactive activity. And actually, a very interesting outcome is of those cases that zero, have ever attempted to create peer-review publications that was actually coming from PMCF data. And obviously, I guess from all of us, that's why I wanted to ask you earlier. You're all coming from scientific background, and in the scientific background, you want to publish things because you want to share knowledge, but also in our regulatory environment, once we publish something, we can use it as references in our own clinical evaluation report. So it makes no sense why when someone goes to the process of PMCF, will not actually do the additional step and create a peer-review publication, take the maximum out of that. And why I'm saying that, as I said earlier, often we're failing to engage with our organizations because we cannot speak the same language to everyone. And I guess most of your organizations have a marketing department or a business development department. Peer review publications is marketing for them. This is actually exactly what we were speaking their language. Now they can take this and use it as part of marketing activities and business development. So what I'm saying here is that again, we have so many opportunities to engage with everyone in organizations in a meaningful manner in order to actually make the most out of PMCF activities. So A big part of this journey of PMCF is, as I said, out of these 24 studies that I gathered here, today I'm going to share one which I think is the most promising for everyone who wants to have a meaningful PMCF activity. When I say meaningful, I mean that we're not just doing it just to tick a box on the regulatory, but because we want to get a compliant and consistent process in order to get performance and safety data for our device and ensure that we're always on top of our device risk management file. I mean, that's imperative. I think it's logical that the reason, obviously, we want to share that is because there is meaningful data to support that we can use that to create a competitive advantage. And I doubt that anyone actually has stand up and said that, it's not just a Me Too activity, but we can create a competitive advantage here. The post-market surveillance activities up until now, they were, and I'm sure that everyone can relate, that they were very much leaning towards reactive measures, essentially vigilance complaints and so on. And the PMCFs were either not done at all or trying to be avoided. But obviously, as you know, under MDR, we need to have a balanced approach between reactive and proactive data in order to best ensure that we are gathering all clinical data we can to support our device performance and safety. And that was actually in the heart of the MDR transition. What I would like to today to introduce to that is that essentially, if we want to see what those activities are, essentially they are part of the lifecycle design. It's part of lifecycle design management. And why is that important for us as a regulatory and clinical professionals? It's important because if we actually want to see, in an ideal world, and how can we create an ideal success cycle, as I said earlier? Let's say that we have, the three elements that are most of the highest concern for us. Is the performance, the safety, and how those actually are feeding into the risk management of our device. Now, over time, we would like to actually have an ideal situation where when the product is first introduced, we start collecting data. We keep collecting data, through the device life cycle, growth, maturity, and decommission. And why do we do that? Well, first of all, we do that because, all of those accumulation of real-world evidence not only allows us to actually create a valid and state-of-the-art understanding of our device in the clinical settings, but most importantly, this becomes legacy data for us in order to create new devices. Obviously, everyone knows how expensive it is to create new devices, introduce new innovation into the market. So the idea here is that, if we want to have a success cycle in our device lifecycle management, PMCF is the way to do it. And I think that also through my own experience of, having my own startups, supporting startups, anyone who claims the opposite essentially doesn't know what he's doing. I'm sorry, I'm a bit binary on yes or no, but this is actually seems to be a valid truth. However, before MDR, and obviously what we see today, is we have this fragmented data that is being generated. And this fragmented data is generated through several parts of the device lifecycle. Now, there are two scenarios we see here. Either during MDD, we have to have, we used to have in the some initial data, clinical data activity, and then it was hop and pray until MDR has been introduced. Or the second scenario was that it was hop and pray from the beginning, because there was ways that we can actually introduce a new device with no clinical data. And now with MDR being here, obviously we're trying to last moment introduce clinical data for our device. Obviously, that's actually a very expensive activity. It's both in terms money, but most importantly, it's the biggest opportunity cost for us, because that means that we cannot create a viable path of clinical data that can actually help us create also new innovation and have a competitive advantage. So essentially, I think that the main shift that we're dealing with, and that's where obviously the notifying bodies want us to actually go, and that's substantiated from our own data from dealing with notifying bodies, is that we want to shift from isolated activities, what I call a Swiss cheese, into device lifecycle management. In all of the cases that have referred for this case, 24 cases for 7 different notifying bodies. In all of those cases, there was this attempt to do a quick and dirty activity of PMCF, or sorry, I apologize. It was the attempt to try to avoid it altogether, and this hasn't passed. Obviously, it bears a big significance about what is the classification of the device. For sure, it plays a big role. The ones that I'm actually referring to were all anything between 2A, 2B, and class 3s. The majority were 2A. And I think that 2A has the highest risk of organizations and manufacturers trying to avoid PMCFs by doing a lot of alchemies in the way that PMCFs are trying to be avoided. However, there was a common theme throughout all notifying bodies here. And yes, I fully understand that the interpretation of notifying bodies varies quite a lot, significantly. We have seen both, very simple devices from which notifying bodies have asked, perhaps I would say even too much for them to substantiate performance and safety, and we have all, let's say, suffered from this non-consistent approach from notifying bodies. However, if there is a common theme throughout all of those, is that the approach of trying to avoid PMCFs by trying to say that I only have legacy PMS and I'm going to use that simply doesn't really fly. And the reason is because I have yet to see legal manufacturers that have let's say, bulletproof post-market surveillance in terms of vigilance and essentially the reactive part of it. What I usually see is that there is a lot of either there is not enough processes to support it there, or there is some clinical data. There are some vigilance data. However, there is not trending. There is not any process-specific control about what it is that drives variation, what drives the performance and the risk issues. So, as I said, I picked one case today that I think it's going to be quite meaningful to share. It's a story of substantiated hope here, and actually it comes from China. It comes from a Chinese legal manufacturer, and traditionally, have worked with quite a lot of legal manufacturers from China. There is an even greater inherent resistance to make PMCF activities. Also because it's mainly consists of the idea that it's basically just a sunk cost that means nothing to anyone. So essentially, the story we're sharing today is about a Chinese manufacturer. It's a Class 2B surgical device. It was actually through the transition for 2027. It was actually, again, through the transition from MDD to MDR, and had good vigilance. I don't mean good enough to actually avoid PMCF, but it was good enough to have a good understanding about the device performance and safety, and have at least, let's say, a presentable first story in order to create a PMCF activity here. Now, this is where the value of understanding device lifecycle it's crucial, of understanding where is our device. Is it in the introduction phase? Is it in the growth phase? Is it in maturity? Or is it the decommission? That's a crucial part. And I think that we, as regulatory or clinical professionals, we need to be able to actually talk in those terms with our management, our business development, and our marketing. Obviously, for a device that it's actually towards the decommission, or there is maybe there is so much price competition, and because they are in the end stage of maturity, maybe even makes no sense to make PMCFs because they want to actually decommission it outside of Europe. That's actually something that can be done. And it's a financial discussion. And this is, again, the value of us as regulatory and clinical professionals engaging with our management and understanding what they see and what we say. So in this case, for example, the very first step we had to do is to identify where this device is in the life cycle status. And obviously, in where we were right now with this device in question was, we identified that it was actually during the maturity stage. Obviously, the question here was step 2, do we want to invest in that, essentially do PMCFs and do the transition to the MDR, or do we want to decommission it? Because there were other devices potentially in the market, and it's a price war. And pricing and competition in something, well, pricing, we in regulatory and clinical, we never think about it, but we should. But the decommission part is also important for us, because when we actually create state-of-the-art discussions and we actually create clinical evaluation report, we do see what is actually there outside in similar devices. So we should be able to understand and provide to the management a reasonable story about why our device should actually be invested even more. So in this case, of this device we're actually working today, was the decision was to actually invest. So essentially, what was that investment? Was a PMCF, and how do we do that? We need to collect the PMCF data, and that's the part where we talk to the management and the business development. The idea was that let's create a PMCF study, granulated enough that we can actually understand how our device is used in the field, and we can potentially try to understand if we can feed this into new designs, so they can see that this is not just an activity that actually is only for regulatory purposes, but it actually has a business development purposes as well. So in this case, yes, the decision was to create MDD to MDR activities and create a very granular process that was a combination of level 4 and level 8 surveys. Okay, all of those were going to be updated, feed into the risk management and CR update, and the existing PMS reactive data has been utilized by essentially making a very comprehensive plan of statistical analysis and essentially trying to milk out any sense of data we get that was previously underutilized. And a big part of what we want to say here is, one of the reasons that you also said that you didn't perform PMCF studies was because of the costs. And obviously, we can do different kind of PMCFs. We can do, level 4, level 8, registries. You can actually do. There is a palette of options here. The one that I would like to share here, that I think it's maybe going under the radar, is that if designed properly, a level 4 study, a prospective study, it can emulate even a registry study. So, and the difference here is chaotic in cost, because let's say a full-blown registry study can go anything from $500,000 to it can go to $2 million if you want to, but level 4 is a fraction. It's 1/20th of that if you want to. So what I'm saying here is that those perceptions that we have about costs are actually need to be rethinked and re-communicated to management if we want to actually have the best outcomes for our PMCFs. An additional item here that is of great importance here is that what did we get out of that? What is the main item we want to use the PMCF? And this is the big opportunity over here, of course. The idea was to obviously get the PMCF data, but then utilize it to, of course, understand if our claims are actually reflecting the use of the device on a daily basis, a better field understanding about how our users interact with our devices, understand off-label opportunities. I'm using here the word opportunities together with off-label. Usually we as regulatory people, when we say off-label, we want to, ignite in fire. Off-label, oh my God, it's going to be a high risk. But what I think here is that one of the focused outcomes of PMCFs is, of course, to understand how our users are interacting with our device. And if off-label opportunities are, off-label use is there, obviously we need to identify if there is a specific off-label use and understand if this actually already captured within the risk management. That's, of course, number one. And exactly what I'm going to explain here is this creates opportunities that if, that we understand, maybe we can actually modify our design a little bit for our device and actually introduce a new device with minimal effort here. So these design updates, if needed, we have two parts of design updates. Either we have a design update that is triggered because of a safety concern, but what we're actually talking about here is potentially design updates that are actually driven because we see that an opportunity in the way that our users themselves explain how they interact with our device. And that's a paradigm shift in the way we understand the devices, because here we have the opportunity of new products. And that's not something that it's commonly associated with PMCF activities. So the result of all of these activities over here, that of course, when this manufacturer came to us, was actually part of this audits, or 24 audits that they were actually having passed because they were trying to avoid it. They were trying to avoid it with all costs. We're going to use reactive data as PMCFs. We're going to do anything in our strength to avoid it. The result was that, of course, they have passed EU MDR for their legacy 2B. But actually, I would say that was the regulatory part that was actually the successful. The higher benefit for the organization was that from this input of off-label uses, the better understanding how the device is interacting with the users in the clinical field. There were 4 new products that have been developed because of PMCF activities. 4. And out of those 4, they didn't have any other competitor in the market. So essentially, what was actually considered to be a regulatory burden and a sunk cost that only fulfills some kind of dead activity that fills no purpose in the organization, it has actually been validated as a form not only of collecting data and understanding the device, but essentially understanding the users and the way that they use the device. And that led to new products. Fun fact, because of all of this legacy data from the technical file update from ND to MDR, the introduction of those devices into the market was actually very efficiently done. So essentially, we have empirical data to support that the PMCF studies here constitute a complete paradigm shift in the way we can actually also implement our design and the introduction of new devices. Now, obviously, this is actually very, again, an overview that is quite important here, because out of those 24 studies that we are actually discussing, some of them had a mix of survey level 8, and some other ones level 4 surveys, but they have all passed with no further actions, 0 further actions. And again, the outcome here is that yes, the notifying bodies were interpreting this. They're interpreting the MDR in convergent, not always in the same manner. But if there is one thing to which they agree, is that a well-designed PMCF study is a very good exercise of collecting objective data that can support the device in the market, and as a first stage, and secondly, if we want to take it further from our example, also create new innovation here. So if I have to actually come up with some lessons learned from this, let's say, cumulative experience with different notifying bodies and also within organizations, that we have to actually involve management here. I mean, if we want to get into actually create PMCF activities here, we have to involve management. And the only way to involve management is to talk to them in a language that they understand, and in a language that actually makes sense to them, in order to actually take a green light and initiate a an activity. Number two, I would say that do not talk regulatory language to everyone. Regulatory language and clinical language sometimes is something that I guess it talks to us because we know it, we understand it, but we're losing our audience, and therefore by losing our audience, we're losing the opportunity to create meaningful clinical activities that actually help us maintain our device in the market. New products. I think that there is for years there has been a lot of reluctance to develop new products because of the cost associated with it. And what I want to actually bring today in the table is, I'm sorry. What I want to bring to the table for you is that new products can actually be supported with PMCF activities as long as those are actually part of device lifecycle management approach that can create a logical sequence in the design of our devices. This paradigm shift into lifecycle management is something that we need to, again, be much more close to. And again, that's because different parts of our organization speak different languages. I would say that even today, some of the traditional manufacturers, they still don't have, let's say, an entire lifecycle management understanding, but their marketing does, the business development have, and the product development have. So as long as we can actually bring all of those parts of our organization under this, let's say, umbrella of lifecycle management, it's much more efficient for us to plan our regulatory and clinical activities in a way that it's consistent to the device lifecycle stage. And a big part, and I would say even I would place it as high as the new product development here in terms of value. In the previous years under MDD, I think legal manufacturers have completely lost touch with the users, either the patients and the users. Essentially, there was a design, take it or leave it. We go, we have a sales representative in the hospital. They make one buy, and then you never see you have nothing to do with the manufacturer anymore, as long as the hospital keeps paying or the users keep paying, for the same device. That created a really lost link of information and actually a relationship between the manufacturer and the users. And with MDR and the introduction of PMCF activities, essentially we are actually demanded to regain that relationship between the manufacturers and the users. So essentially, and what better way to do that by having successful PMCF activities? Because we have seen it so many times and again. Let's say you want to deploy a PMCF survey, and we ask a legal manufacturer, who is our users? Who is our users? Do you know your users? I have no idea. No information about the users. No idea. So it can be a one-time transaction. It can be any excuse you can imagine. Imagine how this will work if they have to do a product recall. How do you do a product recall when you have no understanding about who you're selling your devices to? So I think this PMCF activity is a very good opportunity to also create a meaningful relationship with clinical sites, with users, with patients, that ultimately feeds back into the device understanding and ultimately the risk management of the device. I think if there is one word that I have overused today is the word opportunity. I place it here as a golden egg, and this golden egg can have many yolks inside. It can have the regulatory the gold of regulatory data, clinical data, new product development, recapturing users and patients and clinical sites in a meaningful relationship. So I think that's a golden opportunity that I don't think we're going to have again in the European market until we have an update of the EU MDR. And I think that the organizations, again, through my own experience, the organizations that are not going to capture that opportunity are the ones who cannot have any competitive advantage in the next couple of years, and they're going to have to be withdrawn out of the European Union market. We have seen a lot of manufacturers who are doing that, but again, to take these decisions, we have to make sure that we know where the device is in the device lifecycle stage. So I think that if there is one image that I would like to leave you with today is a big smile, because this clinical evidence success cycle it's working. It's working. We have seen that it's working, and the only way not to work is the reasons that you yourselves placed in the poll. Management decision, and we know we can actually reach them in a different way. The funding can also be an issue. That the thing that it goes back to creating a PMCF plan that is actually sustainable, and sustainability is a word that we haven't used so much in our EU MDR transition, but it is something that we have to implement here, sustainability. And that's something that for at least in EVNIA, sustainability of clinical data collection is the very first thing that we have always done. So I know that it's working. It's not, obviously I'm a scientist, I go by data. If the data is not there, I don't like to support anything. So the success cycle can work, has been, let's say, a struggle the first couple of years, but it all comes back to the going out of the denial circle and a loop of trying to avoid it. Instead, embrace it and make the most of it for the organization, for both clinical use, for regulatory use, for new product development, and reestablishing the use of the relationship between the manufacturers and the users and the devices. I think that we're spot on with time, Chris.
Perfect timing. Absolutely. We've got 13 minutes and change left to the top of the hour. So let's jump right into the Q&A. And Dr. Stathis, thank you so much for the presentation and your time going through your content here. And we appreciate you sticking around for the Q&A here. For all of those that have contributed to the Q&A, thank you. For all those that have taken a look at the questions and upvoted them so that we know how to prioritize which questions we'll start with. Thank you. If you haven't gone in and given a thumbs up to questions you would like prioritized, feel free to jump over to the Q&A tab and hit that thumbs up to upvote any questions that you like and would like to hear answers to. So as promised, I'll start with the most upvoted. So I'm going to share our first one here. This one is from Anne. Having a 2A medical device on the market for over 10 years and no vigilance recall activities, since it seems to me that having PMCF activities through literature, research, non-conformances, and after-sales services studies is enough, what else could we do?
There is no vigilance recall. So there is no vigilance and recall, or there is no vigilance at all, like zero. It seems to be having PMCF activities through literature. Okay, let's go from that. So, for example, PMCF activity, literature search is not PMCF. It's actually a reactive activity. So it cannot go under the umbrella of post-market clinical follow-up. Again, NCs, again, it's not the same. I would place it in the reactive part of it's not a proactive. I think that for sure, all of the items that you describe, Anne, I would place them on a reactive part, not on yeah. So they're all reactive. They're not measures we can actually use. I would actually say, if you are actually very confident about your reactive part, then the proactive part could be something as easy as a level 8 star survey. Those are very simple to conduct. They do provide meaningful clinical data. And what I'm the biggest fan of is to actually have step-by-step approach into these clinical activities. Essentially, what this means is that start with a level 8, because that's the lowest, let's say, intensity study you can actually do. And then create a program, and you say, if only in case I find something that it doesn't reasons with my risk management file, something that is not, I don't perceive it to see something like an off-label use, then I can actually escalate. So I would say start with the level 8 activity for sure. I'm not sure of any. We never had an experience with a notifying body for a 2A that will not act for PMCF activities yet. So I would say start for sure with the level 8.
And I'm going to throw in a question here that's a good follow-up to your response there, Stathis. This one's from Jessica. So let me share this on the screen. Where do you determine the design levels for a prospective study, is there a guidance document? You mentioned level 8. Where is there any sort of guidance that you can direct Jessica to?
Yeah, Jessica is an outstandingly good question here. No, I mean, it's okay. There is no guidance as such for that. I mean, we had the MDCG, we had the MDCG 6 that was actually essentially was some kind of description about level 4, level 8, and so on and so on. But I would say you start first with your clinical evaluation report. The end of your clinical evaluation report defines what is the gap of clinical data that you want to actually, the delta value that you want to fulfill. So essentially, let's say the guidance document here is your CER. A well-made CER will give you this information. Then the question goes is to, if you want a level 8 or you want a level 4. Unfortunately, in all of its, let's say, wisdom, the guidance we have, it doesn't say if it's a level 4, if a level 4 is a prospective or retrospective study. But I can tell you what have worked for us so far with no exceptions whatsoever. We made, let's say, we agreed that anything that is level 8 will be retrospective studies, because MDCG 6 obviously says that these are, let's say, the standard, the minimum standard you can actually achieve. And we say that if it's prospective study, then it's a level 4 study. And then the way that you want to design that, the statistical, the how many centers and all, or users you want to include, that becomes a completely study design question that you can actually answer within the study design part of your activity. But I would say your guidance document here is your clinical evaluation report. So, which means that you have to strive to have a very solid clinical evaluation report here that gives you enough confidence to make this outcome, to make this judgment right.
Excellent. Next question here. Let me find it and share it here. This one was pretty highly upvoted. This one is from Sebastian. Should all the endpoints outcomes tested in a PMCF study be included in the safety and performance parameters of the CEP, or can we test new endpoints, of course, within the same CE indication and population?
Thank you, Sebastian. Let me just try it again. Should all the endpoint outcomes tested in the PM study should be included in the center? Yeah, correct. Yeah, yes. You don't. Let's start with the first thing. Not all manufacturers are aware of the clinical endpoints. Let's start from there. But obviously, assuming that the manufacturer is actually on top of the clinical endpoints here, obviously the endpoints that you have there obviously means that they're actually corresponding to your intended use and the way that the device is used. As long as these are actually well defined in your URS and obviously in your CEP, then you stick to that. So what I'm saying here is that your endpoints should actually match your intended use, of course, and it should be included within the safety and performance parameters that you have in the CP. So as long as they're actually valid to your user requirement specifications and then your design output, those safety and performance parameters are going to allude to the CEP. And if these are actually stand correct, then you just go through that. You don't change it. Because one can say that if those are very well defined, new endpoints potentially means is it new claims or is it better defined endpoints? I would say so. If you have a very well defined endpoint that fulfill your user requirement specifications, you stick to that. Does this answer your question, Sebastian?
And we'll keep an eye on the chat there. We'll keep on marching along here, Stathis, but thank you for answering that one, Sebastian. If you have any follow-up, we'll try and get to it, but we'll continue with the upvoted questions here. So the next highest upvoted questions, another one from Sebastian. Great questions here. Everyone's loving the questions that you're dropping. Can you elaborate on and explain the differences in boundaries between a survey and a clinical study, particularly in the context of a survey that includes patient data? So just kind of defining that gray area between surveys and clinical studies.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Sebastian. So again, here there is a very good guidance for us. Obviously, is the MDCG level. MDCG 6 provides a good overview between the surveys and the clinical studies. So I would start from there. But essentially, a clinical study, to actually let's say simplify it, I would say a survey is something that you deploy for a device that it's already CE marked. It's in the market, and you want to actually make sure that you have the best of your performance and safety understanding of the device. Typically, clinical studies, because they're actually much more expensive and much more time consuming, they are mainly deployed for either if you want to have a new claim. So you have an existing device and you want to add a new claim which substantiates the clinical study, so both in terms of costs and time, or if you have a brand new device that it's not in the market, and you need to have some of your clinical study to enter the market. If your device it's in the market, make sure you have a good clinical evaluation report, and you can actually focus on either surveys or registries, and only add clinical studies if you're going to add new claims. If that's the case, I hope it helps the difference. So if your device is already in the market, use a survey, either level 4, level 8, or the registry. If it's not yet in the market, or if you want to have a new claim on that, then you can use a clinical study.
Excellent. Well, for the sake of time here, I do need to conclude here. So we'll go ahead and wrap. We did not get to all the questions. That's pretty typical, but we will share all of the questions with Stathis here and give him the opportunity to answer those directly. But we'll go ahead and conclude here for today. We're almost at time. Stathis, thank you so much for the amazing presentation, as well as your valuable insights during the Q&A. As a reminder for all of the attendees here today, yes.
I can also say that if anyone wants to reach out, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to actually answer that as well. More than happy. I mean, that's what we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Much appreciated. As a final reminder for attendees today, the recording and the presentation slides will be sent to you in the following days. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you all again for attending today's presentation, and have a fantastic rest of your day. And Stathis, thank you one more time for joining us here today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, and have a lovely day, everyone.
You as well.